Boom, I hope we are live. First gotta make sure and check if everything is working. We are live. Okay. Cool, yeah, so welcome back everybody. It's the second video or second episode here today on Cryptocito on the channel. First of all, as always, please tell us in the comments that the sound is all right, that the audio works, the video and all these things. That's the most important, I guess. And yeah, today I have a very special guest, actually a Cosmos OG, an early investor in the Cosmos ecosystem and Cosmos itself. Alex Tapscott is here. He's a managing director at the Digital Assets Group with 9 Point Partners. You're also a co-author of the Blockchain Revolution, which I think was from 2015 or 16, and also co-founder of the Blockchain Research Institute. So there's going to be a lot of things that we'll cover today. And we'll talk most about Cosmos, but also your journey. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, so maybe there's some lessons learned that you can share. But first things first, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time. How's everything going?
Everything's great. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah, so before we dive into Cosmos, sound is great. I'm hearing from the people, great. Before we dive into Cosmos, it would be great if you can share a little bit of your time before crypto. How did you enter the industry and what got you hooked in, was it 2015 or even before that? It was a long time ago, right?
I first learned about Bitcoin back in 2013. I think like a lot of people, when Bitcoin was beginning to find product market fit as a way to buy things on Silk Road. And I think like a lot of people, I thought that was a little strange, but the more I looked into it, the more convinced I became basically that Bitcoin was something very significant. This is, of course, before the word blockchain had entered the vernacular and before even Ethereum had launched, let alone Cosmos and many of these other really interesting projects. And, you know, at the time, Bitcoin had a market value, I think, of around $4 or $5 billion. So if it were a publicly traded company, it would have been, you know, the 500th largest company on the stock exchange in the US, right? Just to give it some perspective, this was still pretty early days. It wasn't 2009, but it was still pretty early days. And, you know, I was interested by the asset. At the time, I was working in financial services at an investment bank in Toronto called Canaccord Genuity. And I guess like a lot of people, I saw an opportunity to maybe trade it, make some money, buy and hold, you know, whatever people were doing. But as I said, the more I looked into it, the more convinced I became that there was something really real there. And what I sort of kind of came to an epiphany to is that Bitcoin was an important innovation, blockchain was an important innovation, and collectively they represented the beginnings of a new internet, essentially. You know, for 30 years, we've had the internet of information, which has been this really powerful tool that's changed how we communicate and how we consume content and so forth. But it didn't actually do very much to change how we move and store assets or how we establish trust online. And so we still basically relied on intermediaries in the first era of the internet, as we did in the pre-internet age. And what Bitcoin basically proved is that we could create scarcity in digital goods, and we could use that as a way to move and store assets peer-to-peer without banks and other brokers. And so to me, it was, well, if that works for Bitcoin, what else could it work for? Could you use the same principle of a shared ledger and distributed trust to move and store other kinds of assets, organize capability, build new kinds of business models, and so on and so forth, right? So all of that became the basis for the book that you just referred to, Blockchain Revolution. In 2015, I quit my job to write a book, having never written a book, to do something with my dad, who was my co-author, having never really done anything professionally with him, and with no clue of what was going to happen after all of this was kind of done, after the book was done and came out, if it ever came out. Like, we didn't really know what we were embarking on. But what I was convinced of then, as I am now, was that this is the beginning of something huge. And they say, you know, when someone offers you a seat on a rocket ship, you don't ask which seat, you know, you don't say, is it in first class or not? You just get on the rocket ship and go for the ride. And that's basically what I've done since. And it's been a hell of a ride, I must say.
Yeah, and in 2013, like I said, there was pretty much only Bitcoin, right? And has your perception, have your views on Bitcoin itself changed over these 8 years? What do you think about Bitcoin today as compared to in 2013?
Well, I think my views have certainly evolved as it relates to Bitcoin and all other assets in this ecosystem. But I wouldn't say that I'm any less bullish on Bitcoin now than I was back then. I think that Bitcoin actually more than any other crypto asset has found a real product market fit. It's found a real persistent sort of place in people's shared consciousness, in the meme side of all of this. I think that, Bitcoin has established itself as, the dominant cash for the internet, as a version of digital gold, some sort of store of value that can't be printed away by governments or by central banks, as a medium of exchange that in many respects is superior to many of the ways in which we move and store money today, and has found a real fit in the developing world as a place for people who are either underbanked or subject to hyperinflationary regimes to store money for the long haul. And I think that Bitcoin is basically unrivaled in this role. And that's why I am very bullish on Bitcoin. Then I contrast that to a lot of the other crypto assets. You mentioned at the beginning that I'm currently overseeing the digital asset group at 9 Point Partners. 9 Point's an $8 billion asset management firm based in Toronto. We have a Bitcoin ETF and some other products coming out soon. And a question I often get is, is Ethereum going to take over Bitcoin? And what about all these other things? People usually in the regulated market, like in the traditional financial world, haven't heard about Cosmos. I'm trying to change that, of course. But generally it's, Ethereum versus Bitcoin. And I try to tell them, these are two different things, and they're trying to do different things. And as exciting as Ethereum is, it is in a competitive environment with lots of other, layer ones and other kinds of technologies to capture developer mindshare for all these new applications that are being built. Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin really does stand alone. Like, I personally don't think that there's any other form of digital money that has the same kind of network effects and the same kind of mimetic value that Bitcoin does. So to answer that's a long form way of saying my views have certainly changed from when Bitcoin was, a rounding error in the eyes of many people. But I still have a very favorable view of Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think especially on periods like this, in the past few weeks, it has been pretty bearish sentiment. Things went down, right? A lot of people are capitulating and saying like, oh, it's all overbought. We're going down from here, and that's the end. It's like all these scenarios. But I think what you just said is really powerful. Is like in developing countries, right, where free, like open money and open banking ecosystem, right, which is what Ethereum is, and you can have DeFi applications and peer-to-peer NFT marketplaces, right, which adds a lot of value for people, especially in developing nations. I think that's in the longer run the actual value accrual that kind of replaces the current speculation that we have in the space, right? Because I think right now maybe 95% in crypto is speculation driven, right? All the value that floods into that market is just, maybe in the future is going to be worth more because it's the fastest growing industry under the sun. And you can see that on so many analytical points there. I just had a chat yesterday with Lex from an NFT project in Cosmos. And after that, we talked for another half hour or so. And he said, man, it's so hard to even find blockchain developers, right? And the premium that you have to pay for them in terms of salaries is absolutely insane, right? So I think it's always important to remind the people, especially those that join this industry new, like this industry is here to stay. Like and we're still, about to launch the rocket ship. So another thing I wanted to
let me respond to a couple of things that you said there. So yeah, we're in the midst of a drawdown. Bitcoin's gone from 68,000 to 47,000 or whatever it is as we're recording this. I mean, this is the kind of drawdown that happens like a couple times a year, sometimes more often, and has occurred throughout the life cycle of this asset class. I think that the response from the market is completely disproportionate to the decline that we've seen. And I think maybe that has to do with the fact that because the market has grown so much, a majority of people in crypto have probably only been around for the past, 6 months. That has to be the only explanation, because anybody who's seen previous cycles is looking at this and saying, yeah, maybe we were a little overbought and due for a correction. But overall, to your point, all the fundamentals across the industry look really strong. So it's probably not time to panic yet. Anybody who survived 95 to 99% drawdowns in alts during the 2017, 2018 cycle, I think probably is not as concerned about Ethereum going from $4,600 to $3,800, or Bitcoin dropping by 35 or 40%. That's a Tuesday in the old days. So I think that it's worth keeping that in perspective. And you know what? I think that speculation has driven a lot of interest in this space, but I think increasingly you're seeing a lot of separation between chains where there's a lot of on-chain activity, where there's a lot of application development, and then those that are ghost chains or ones where there isn't any activity. In the past, I think all coins basically moved in the same direction at the same time, and the smaller you were, the higher beta you were, which basically meant, if Bitcoin went up $1, you might go, or 1%, you might go up 2%, right? And these days, that's not the case. These days, the projects increasingly, I won't say overall, but I would say increasingly, the top 25, top 30 names are composed of blockchain protocols and projects where there's like real utility and real value and real usefulness. You look at the success of like Solana or Avalanche and moving up to the top ranks, or the Terra project, and that's evidence. I would say that probably there's still a big disconnect in Cosmos between what's actually happening in the ecosystem and where it is positioned relative to others. I would say that it's probably the exception that proves the rule. But for reasons that I'm happy to discuss, I actually think that 2022 is going to be Cosmos's year. And then the final thing I'll say is that, in 2018 December, which was the bottom of the barrel of the last bear cycle, I wrote an op-ed piece where I tried to, put this all into perspective, which is to say, at the time it's a venture market. The market had gone from $800 billion in market value to $200 billion in market value. But if you peeled back the envelope, you would look and see, the launch of new L1s, you'd see, 200,000 people developing projects in Solidity on Ethereum. You would see all sorts of new projects, this new nascent thing called DeFi may be emerging. And I said, give it time. And then obviously fast forward to today, and at the bottom of this little, mini cycle we're in, the market's still 3.5 times as big as it was at the top of the last cycle, right? So it's worth keeping these things in perspective as you're experiencing the bouts of volatility, which are inevitably going to happen because we still are in a market that's in its early days.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think we're also seeing right now this transition from speculation more and more. It's going to take time. I think we're still pretty early, but to real adoption, right? Real value. And you're running a podcast, right? Or a show here on YouTube as well,
yeah.
Where you just had Sunny on, right? And you talked about Osmosis. Somebody in the comments also just said, Alex's episode on Osmosis with Sunny is super good. So you are also fully aware of what's going on in Cosmos. And you also just said that with your fund, you're trying to raise more awareness on that. So my question is, what has been the investment thesis that you had with 9point or with the digital asset group in the past years? And what are you planning to do now moving forward in the context maybe to Cosmos as well?
Thanks for mentioning the podcast. We host a weekly podcast called DeFi Decoded. It's on the 9point Partners YouTube channel, but you can also get it on Apple Music and Spotify and others. And for the first 10 weeks, we basically went through all the functions of what the financial industry does and all the ways in which DeFi is starting to change that. And then we've done some interviews, including excellent people like with Sunny from Osmosis. My stake in Cosmos and my interest in Cosmos predates my job at 9point. Actually, at 9point Partners, our primary fund is a Bitcoin ETF, which is a way for investors to get exposure to Bitcoin through a listed vehicle. And as I mentioned, we have other things coming, but my investment in Cosmos is not through 9point. So I just wanted to clarify that. My thesis in Cosmos at the beginning, I got to admit, was pretty simple. It was, I heard Ethan Buckman and Jay Kwan present to a group of seasoned 50-something-year-old investors. And all of these seasoned 50-something-year-old investors, basically to a man, and they were mostly men, said, I don't really know what you're talking about. And I figured, well, if these guys had no clue, then this team of young people must really know what they're talking about, or they must be really onto something. That was my initial sort of insight. Now that's sort of superficial, but the more I got to know Ethan and Jay, the more I began to understand what their vision was. And it's so interesting. I think that the Cosmos vision is one of those things where it's an idea whose time may have finally come. I think that the idea of a multi-chain future seemed kind of foreign in 2015 when Ethereum had just launched and there was no real application layer on top of any of these blockchains. But if you fast forward to today, you've got this very different kind of landscape, right? You've got Ethereum, which was where a lot of these early crypto applications launched, but has become a victim of its own success in the sense because of the popularity of DeFi and NFTs and others. The gas fees are really high. So unless you're a whale, transacting on Ethereum is kind of prohibitively expensive. You're not going to be able to attract a new person to crypto who's got $1,000 or $5,000 that wants to experiment with DeFi and buy an NFT if the gas fees are $200, on each side of a transaction, in and out, right? And so you saw these other layer ones that have launched, and that was sort of the legacy of the last ICO boom, where you have Avalanche and Solana and others. And today, at least, they're attracting a lot of these new users because the fees are really low. But in the same sense that like Ethereum, the fees used to be really low, I wonder how long these new layer ones can sustain that kind of an advantage. Maybe they're cheap just because they don't have as many users. When they do have more users, the fees will go up. And also a lot of these different protocols are making certain trade-offs around centralization versus throughput, right? So, there's a great podcast I actually listened to recently, Uncommon Core, where Su Zhu, who's the head of Three Arrows Capital, basically explains the spectrum where you've got most decentralized chain like Bitcoin, least decentralized chain like BSC, and a lot of these things existing in the center. And it's sort of in the center where I think, yeah, maybe for now there's a lot of throughput, but the more volume and the more activity that happens on these different kinds of chains, the more their fees are going to go up. So in my view, I subscribe to the view of Chris Dixon and Andreessen Horowitz, who basically says block space is going to be the most scarce resource in the world for the next decade or so, as more and more computations and more applications start to run on blockchains. So inevitably, it's not a question of which L1 is going to win. It's actually a question of how are we going to knit together all of these disparate blockchains into one single internet of blockchains. So the concept of a multi-chain future is one that until this year, and maybe even the second half of this year, has been sort of academic because we haven't needed multiple chains. But now we're in this space where, because of the popularity of these of this technology, there is a demand for block space, which means there's going to be a demand for interoperability, a demand for composability, and thus a role for IBC and Cosmos as a whole. So for me, it just seems like one of these really interesting natural progressions. We had Bitcoin, money is for the internet, store of value. Then there was Ethereum, the first, world computer that you can run applications. Then it was, well, how do we scale them? Well, now we've got new L1s. And of course, there are L2s and rollups and everything else for Ethereum. But now it's like, okay, we're clearly in this world where the big scarce resource is block space. How are we going to make this all happen on an interconnected basis? And I think Cosmos has the best design to make that happen. And by the way, like, this isn't something that's experimental or we need to wait till next year to see. Over $150 billion of value is secured via IBC, via Cosmos, and many of the most popular projects in the world have in some way a connection to the Cosmos ecosystem, which is as it should be, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and we had actually just 2 chains that went live on mainnet, with the Loom network that just launched like half an hour ago, and the Chihuahua chain, right? Chihuahua, I don't know if you've seen that, but it's the first meme coin on Cosmos. And it's just growing, right? I mean, like I said, the way Cosmos resolves this is basically through this vertical scalability, where you have application-specific chains that are just designed to fulfill one task, right? One task at a time, instead of having one chain that is trying to do everything, right? I think another project that is also pretty innovative in that space is Polkadot. And actually, before I discovered Cosmos, I was more on the Polkadot train. But then, there's just a lot of things that are still down the road. And the way Polkadot is structured is basically from the top down, and Cosmos is from bottom up. So that's one kind of like architectural standpoint that really resonated with me, because I also have this vision, like you said earlier, to have this multi-chain future, right, where everybody can build whatever they want, and then the market will decide which dApp or which application is going to get traction, right?
Yeah.
Instead of having this kind of like narrowed down tribals in some cases even, right? Behavior where say, oh, we have one winner that's going to take it all and everything else is going to die.
I think that's right, and I think that another now. So we at DeFi Decoded, it's not like we have a Cosmos bias, but we actually happen to have interviewed a lot of people from the ecosystem. So we spoke to Sunny, as you mentioned. We also have an episode with Peng Zhang, who's the CEO of Tendermint. We also did an episode with Ethan Buckman, who's the co-founder of Cosmos. And we just yesterday did an episode with Greg Osuri of the Cash Network, which is building a decentralized cloud on IBC that's going to help to make DeFi possible I think on a real sort of global basis. And I think it was in the episode with Peng where I tried to make an analogy that people like our non-crypto audience would understand. And basically, you can think of like, this is maybe not totally accurate, but it's a way that I think people help to understand. So, in Ethereum is like Amazon. And, if you're an individual seller, you've got to list on Amazon, use Amazon's backend, and you're beholden to Amazon sort of rules. And Cosmos is more like Shopify in the sense that, there's sorts of shared usefulness and shared utility, like shared security and, other functionality. But you can have your own store with its own rules and its own website and its own, different functionality and design. And it gives you way more creativity where you're still tying into the shared infrastructure of this entity, but you're not like listed on you're not like just some widget on top of this global behemoth. And another analogy I like to use is, if Ethereum is trying to take an old computer, and not an old computer, but a computer, and optimize its software for speed, and these other one mega computer, like one super mainframe, and optimize it for speed, and these other L1s are trying to build a new mainframe. Cosmos is more just trying to connect thousands and thousands of PCs together, and those PCs collectively end up harnessing more power than the big mainframe does. And I don't know. I mean, the invention of the internet in the first era and all sorts of other systems have relied in some degree on decentralization, and the idea of application-specific blockchains all tied in through a central hub seems like more logical to me than the idea of running everything on one super duper computer. Like that seems very old school and not what history has told us works in practice.
Yeah, and I think Ethan also gave this analogy, I don't know if it was on your podcast, about how we're basically switching from the personal computer era to the community computer era, right? Where each computer in the world is kind of like part of a bigger network, right? And I think that's an amazing analogy. And also I think the way Cosmos is designed is exactly as the current internet is, just in a decentralized fashion, right? So, and then you have IBC, which could be kind of like the TCP/IP standard to connect all these things in the backend seamlessly without even having to bother about it. But so you have been in Cosmos pretty early on. Maybe you can talk us through your entire Cosmos journey in a short span, like how it was in the beginning, how you witnessed it over the years. Obviously, I think IBC has been delayed a little bit. Everybody wanted it to launch earlier, right? So how was all this time with all ups and downs? You can share whatever you want here.
Well, I first learned about it in 2017 or 2016. Maybe, I think it must have been 2016. That's when Jay and Ethan first presented. And then I stayed in touch with them over the course of 2017 and was involved very early on. And, for a couple of years after that, I was pretty not involved as things were being developed before launch, right? And then when the launch happened in, I think it was March or April of 2019, that's when there was more to talk about, I think, for a lot of people, and to explain what was really going on here. One thing I will say about the Cosmos community is, and I know that some people in Cosmos, are wish that there was better communication around the value capture of the token and all this stuff. But you know what? Like having been through many cycles before, teams that are passionate, the missionary teams, not the mercenary teams, like the ones who care about what's being built, not just the number going up, are the teams that will survive and last the longest. I really wonder if there is another bear market in crypto, just how many of these fatty FADDY, these hot new projects are going to kind of fizzle out because people are going to be way underwater on their bags, and then they're gonna be like, oh, you know what, I don't really care about this anymore. With Cosmos, I'm not saying it's immune to market forces, but I think that there are people who are in this stuff because they really believe in the mission and they're really trying to create a better world. Certainly that's true for Ethan. I know that for a fact. He comes from it more honestly than anybody I've ever met in my entire life, and in terms of his level of dedication and passion to the cause. So to me, it makes it anti-fragile in a way. It makes it resilient. The things that might break other projects, the market going down, I think are the kinds of things that might actually make Cosmos stronger. So to me, I'm very bullish on the people and on the ecosystem and what's being built. And it's not like this is all, we're not in the late stages of anything here. This is still the very early days of this whole ecosystem. And as I said, I think that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I think the idea of multi-chain as a concept has really found its place.
Awesome. Yeah. And we have right now around 50 people watching here. So please, everybody, share the link to this video so people can join us. You can also drop questions in the comments. I can get back to that later. But yeah, I mean, a lot of cool things that you said. And I think actually right now, 20 minutes ago, the latest Vega upgrade was implemented on the Cosmos Hub, right? And this launched potentially the era of IBC routing, which is something that you could save a lot of time and efforts for newer chains to route IBC packets through the Cosmos Hub, which would mean a lot of value accrual for the Atom. Then we have interchain security lined up, which would mean that you have something more like Polkadot, where you can borrow security from the Cosmos Hub, which would also mean a lot of value accrual for the Atom. So moving forward, and also maybe right now, what are some of the things that you are mostly excited about? Maybe some things that you're also using. I'm sure you're also an avid Osmosis degen. What are some of the things that you're excited about in Cosmos for the Atom, or it can be any other project also in its ecosystem?
Yeah, I think the launch of Osmosis has been one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. From the genesis of that until today, when I remember when Sunny tells a story actually on DeFi Decoded of basically, having an idea, building together like a minimum viable product, perfecting or improving upon that, and then launching it into the world. And within 6 months, it was at almost $1 billion of TVL and had just closed to $30 million financing. And today is where a lot of really interesting tokens of good projects, like a Cash, for example, are traded primarily on this network. So it creates this like flywheel effect where the bigger it gets, the more of these good projects are listed and trade on it, the more volumes they beget, and the more value accrues to that platform. And that's all because of the connection to Cosmos. So I think that there's a lot of discussion around value accrual or capture, I guess is the word. But to me, that's almost value creation. It is more important. And to me, being an atom holder that's staking atoms is basically like just sort of, you sit back and you take in a steady stream of dividends and new and interesting projects. And like, I can't imagine a more compelling reason to hold something than to get first dibs on a lot of really amazing projects. Now, like, not all of these things are going to end up working out. In fact, probably many of them will fail. That's true for lots of early stage projects. But amongst that group are going to be the next Uniswap and the next Aave and the next this, that, and the other, like in terms of the size that they can get to. And that's really just the beginning, because I think obviously this is going to be bigger than what's been created so far. So to me, I think that's kind of as good a reason as any to be a long-term holder of the native token without being even necessarily an active participant. Obviously, it's fun to use Osmosis and others, but there is even a passive sort of sit back and be in a coma for a year kind of thing that could work really well as well. Sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing, right? This is something I learned as an investor. I've churned stuff, traded it because I thought I had some edge, and honestly, my biggest gains have come from sitting around doing nothing. So sometimes you just have to be patient.
100% correct, man. And people in crypto, especially when they're new, they tend to always chase pumps. They tend to blindly follow the latest whatever hot coin that any YouTuber says out there, instead of just doing the research, doing the work once, and then stick with something. So I think that's like the key message here. Because honestly, in crypto, like people should think in 3-4 years kind of like cycles, but they only think in 3-4 weeks, right? They want to be rich now, yesterday, right? Instead of just saying, hey, I'm putting in some more efforts, and then 2-3 years, which is actually already short term, right? Potentially you can 10x your holdings. So really exciting. Now you said you've been around for a long time already. You've been through a couple of cycles. So I guess you're completely numb to what's going on right now. What is your thoughts on where we headed with crypto? I guess this year is over. What about the first half maybe, or the whole year of 2022? What do you think is going to be predominant narratives in the space? Do you anticipate anything that's going to blow up, whether it's gaming, NFTs, or anything in the crypto industry?
Well, so first of all, I think that like crypto cycles don't end on a double top. Like the top we had in May, and then the one that we had recently, almost mirrored each other in terms of their shape and so forth. And in my view, there's still more room to run here. And I don't subscribe to the view that there will never be a bear market in the same way that we've had before. I think that those kinds of predictions, can be a little bit too aggressive. But what I will say is that I think having experienced these past cycles puts this one in perspective. I wouldn't say it makes it less painful to lose money. I don't think anybody likes to lose money, but it helps to put it in perspective. So that's point one. Point two is themes. Well, the big theme is the multi-chain future, right? And I think that's something that plays perfectly to Cosmos's usefulness and role in the ecosystem. So I think that's a huge tailwind that should benefit anybody who can really achieve that. And I think Cosmos is a beneficiary. And then in terms of big themes, there's not like some big thing around the corner that people haven't already talked about. I think that the future of DeFi is DeFi. I think that we're still very, very early in a lot of this stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing the kinds of native DeFi applications that get built on other chains and on Cosmos. So far, basically, we've seen people copy pasting Ethereum applications and sticking them on other networks, whether it's lending protocols or whether it's monkey NFTs or whatever. Like, I think that there's a lot of derivative work that's happening, and I'm looking forward to some original masterpieces, which is going to help to drive this thing forward. I think we need to create better ways for the next billion people to get involved into this space. The user interface for crypto has gotten a lot better from what it was a few years ago, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. And then, areas of interest for me, I mean, DeFi remains my main interest simply because, I come from the financial world. I just know more about it, and I'm more interested in it than I am in some of these other areas. Stopped playing video games 10 years ago. I like the play to earn video game. Like, I get it. I think it's fascinating, the metaverse and so forth, but it's not like I don't come at that with, a lifetime of being obsessed with playing video games or online, massive open online role-playing games or any of that stuff. This is not what I do. So like, I get it. I think it's fascinating, but I'm not like playing Axie Infinity all day long, right? So I'm still interested in that though, and I will be tracking that very closely as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I tweeted also this morning about the play to earn thing, and I think stake to earn is much more relaxed than play to earn, right? You can just, like we said earlier, you just get your coins, you stake them natively on chain. If you want, you can also participate in governance. I think we've seen Osmosis that it's one of the most active governance protocols out there. The community is absolutely nuts. I think the 99th proposal just went up. So there's already cool things that you can do there without having to like waste your energy and time playing a game to get a token that might have value. But I'm still bullish in the longer run on play to earn. I think it's a fundamental change to the gaming industry itself. So
well, what you just described was, it's better to just sit back passively and earn tokens than it is to play to earn. Now, that assumes that the playing isn't the point, right? That playing isn't fun or pleasurable. And so that's why I think the play to earn the play to earn space to me is interesting. Will become more interesting when game developers who know how to build and design really fun, awesome games also start getting into play to earn. So people will start earning doing something they would have done anyway, even if they weren't earning. Whereas I think with a lot of play to earn games today, it's a lot of like click farms, basically, people in the Philippines and elsewhere just playing to earn just so they can earn, not actually playing because there's any joy or fun to it. So seeing that kind of a shift occur where, you have this economic model that incentivizes people to play a game that is also fun would be very interesting too.
Another trend that I think is going to blow up inevitably is institutional DeFi, right? Which basically means to make it easier and more compliant and more everything for institutions and banks and financial institutions to get involved into DeFi, right? Because they see the crazy APRs, they see that users are jumping on these things. So they obviously want to also take a piece of the cake and get involved. So what is your thoughts? Obviously, you are much deeper into that, have a strong financial background. What do you observe in terms of the dynamics in the institutional DeFi sector? Do you think that's something that will blow up soon, or is it going to take a few more years? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there already is institutional DeFi, and it depends on what kind of institution you're talking about. Large whales, family offices, hedge funds, and others in the private market are already in the space in a big way. The question is, when will, regulated banks and mutual fund companies and those kinds of entities get involved? And I would say that that's still probably a ways away. And the reason for that is around the issue of identity and KYC. So basically, one of the big benefits of crypto and DeFi is that you can access it without sharing any information about who you are. So it means that you can access a range of financial services without going through all the same hoops. Now, if you're a young person, or you're living in the developing world, that's a really big benefit. And I think that's why, the most popular countries in the world for like MetaMask, for example, which is the main gateway to DeFi, are like the Philippines and Malaysia, because there are a lot of people there who couldn't possibly dream of accessing the kinds of services that DeFi offers in their native land. However, when it comes to institutions, not being able to know anything about anybody in the system is sort of a big problem. And in order to, for example, like let's say you're using like a lending protocol, for example, if you're a bank, and you're lending money to someone, you need to know a lot about who that person is. And with DeFi, you're not lending to anybody. You're staking money. You're putting money into like a smart contract, which is then lending it out on the other side. So there are things that need to change in order to do that. So a lot of people talked about like segregated pools, basically pools where there's like a minimum level of like KYC and AML clearance. So it's basically like I guess like a sandbox for institutions to play it in the DeFi space. That's certainly an option. Another option is to create sovereign, like to focus more on the identity side and create ways for individuals to prove who they are based on their on-chain activity or other credentials or other information about themselves. And to me, that's really interesting too. There's a project called the Shift Network, SHYFT, that's trying to work in a compliant identity that can be plugged in to centralized exchanges, decentralized exchanges, and other players as a way to comply with the FATF rules. There's other stuff like that out there. But to me, those would be like the main areas that I've seen, at least, where we're seeing ways to try and get to institutional DeFi, which would be, the segregated pool side, or creating, a universal sort of identity, a credentialing system that would give people and institutions comfort about who the counterparties and who the other entities are in a marketplace.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot coming in the Cosmos ecosystem. I think T-Grade is a platform that's coming up from the Confio team, the same team that also developed CosmWasm, and then a bunch of others. I just saw today also a project that brings real estate on the Cosmos ecosystem. So very exciting things. Now, before we get into one or two community questions, what do you think does it take for Cosmos to get really onto everyone's radar, right? You said earlier, maybe 2022 might be the year for Cosmos to go viral. So what do you think is it that will bring it onto the, I don't know, top 10, top 5, maybe also in terms of market size of all cryptocurrencies?
Well, I think that, so within the crypto community, the idea of multi-chain is becoming more popular. I think it's probably going to become a consensus view at some point, and that should drive people who are in this world to see Cosmos for what it is. But I think in terms of driving overall value long term, you need to have stuff that runs on Cosmos that people really want to use, right? And that has at least some sort of value capture for the native token over time, or value creation for the native token over time. And it sounds to me, based on everything I've read in our conversation today, that there are lots of things like that. Now, again, it's all about, if you're only going to recreate something that already exists on another chain, but maybe better, faster, cheaper, more interoperable, more composable, etc., that's great, and that will help. But as I said, original masterpieces, or sort of like things that can only work here in this ecosystem that can't work elsewhere, or something that's original and unique, that's going to be the way in which I think a lot of these things distinguish themselves. I think about Terra in this respect, like UST. Is like a great example of almost like a protocol, like leading with an application first, and that application growing in size and becoming super useful, and then that driving obviously a lot of demand to the and interest in the native token. So I don't know. I don't think that. Anyway, my point is only like I think that kind of application development can certainly help.
Awesome. Yeah, let's pick two questions and then we can wrap it up. Summit is asking whether there's any project that you would pick from the ecosystem over others if you would have to.
Well, it's hard for me not to be really excited about Osmosis after the conversation with Sunny recently. I mean, it's just, he articulates such a clear vision. I'm not saying it's the best thing on Cosmos. It's just the one that maybe I know the most about. And so that's one, obviously, that I like a lot.
Yeah, and I've met Sunny here in Lisbon also when he came for Cosmoverse, and man, he's an absolute legend. Like when he comes to the room, you feel it. He's there, and he's such a positive vibe. And I feel like always when he enters the room, he's the smartest guy in the room, and everyone is like, man, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So Sunny is an absolute legend. Big shout out. And yeah, I agree. Osmosis is amazing.
Well, you know what? Before you answer that question, I will just say that every time I walk into any room with smart people in crypto, I never feel like the smartest person in the room, and I think that there's a lot about this that people understand as they're building it. Sorry, excuse me. That I don't necessarily, because I'm not a computer scientist by background, right? But I think maybe if I have any talent, it's recognizing people who are smarter than me and trying to hitch my wagon to them in some way and help them in some way that I can't, right? And I think that this ecosystem is full of a lot of people like that.
Yeah, and I think there's also this saying, like, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
So I think Sunny is having a very hard time with that. But yeah, that's his problem.
Yeah.
Cactus Steve is asking, for the most part, institutions and corporate municipal funds have stayed on the sidelines. Do you think Cosmos and IBC can help bridge the TradFi world to the cross-chain DeFi world better?
I think yes. I think that some of the things that I just described can be implemented in Cosmos. I think also, speaking from personal experience, institutional investors are becoming much more familiar with the language of crypto and with how this stuff works. And a lot of them have already broken the seal and started to dabble, right? And typically they do that by investing into Bitcoin and Ether via exchange traded funds or products like ours, which trades on the Toronto Stock Exchange. But increasingly, I think as they become familiar with it, they realize that by looking only at Bitcoin and Ether, they're not fully capturing all that's out there, and they'll be looking for ways to get involved. I think what we do at 9Point, which is to find ways for traditional investors to get exposure to this asset class via ETFs and other fund products, is going to continue to be a major source of growth of interest in the space. And I think also that creating those tools that I described to make it easier for institutions to conduct business in the DeFi space in a compliant way, where they'll be satisfying the conditions of their regulators, is going to be really critical too. So I'm not smart enough to know everything that's going on in Cosmos as to whether or not that's happening, but I certainly see the tools and the desire to make that a reality.
Yeah, it's also, there's so much that's going on. It's hard to catch up. And even though I'm covering this ecosystem basically as a full-time job now, it's even for me hard to stay up to date with everything. Martin has a question. I think I can answer that real quick. Whether there's any roll-up exposure in the Cosmoverse. Check out Celestia. They're building something really cool. It's a bit hard to wrap your head around. I'm still also in my research phase, but they're dealing with roll-ups on Cosmos and also data availability. Vitalik just wrote a paper about that. So this could be a very, very exciting thing. Final question, I guess, completely random from Artem. What do you think about Juno? I don't know if you're even involved in Juno or have used it or seen it. Did they have an upgrade tomorrow? Juno Network. Have you heard of the project? Are you
All I know is there's an airdrop, right? Again, like, I wish I had enough time to track every project in the Cosmos space. I don't. Maybe if you have anything about it, I'd be very curious to know.
So Artem, in short, he's bullish. Okay. No, Juno is actually a cool project because it's a smart contract platform that is from the community. So they have no VCs, no private investors. 97% of the supply is managed by the community. You mentioned the airdrop. That's how they rolled out the initial coins. And it's basically designed to kind of like offload smart contract activity from the Cosmos Hub to preserve this neutrality of the Cosmos Hub as this source of security and IBC terminal, right? So I think that's a cool thing. And tomorrow is going to be the integration of smart contracts from Cosmwasm. So that's why everyone's really excited. And I told this also earlier today on my channel, always make sure to hold your coins in self-custody, because whenever these major upgrades happen, there's very likely that there's going to be an airdrop, right? For projects that launch on top, especially of a smart contract platform. So
you're referring to like if you have your coins on Binance or something, you may not participate in those drops, right? Right.
Yeah, not your what is it? Not your keys, not your coins, not your airdrop.
I like that. Not your keys, not your airdrops.
Yeah, even this is the most
not your
important.
staking yield, not your airdrops.
Yeah, and another one that's coming up is also Evmos. I don't know if you heard of that one, but they are launching basically Ethereum on Cosmos. So that's going to be a fully compatible smart contract platform that enables also Ethereum smart contracts in the Cosmos ecosystem. And they're also going to do an airdrop. So cosmonauts are getting spoiled with free money left and right. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Before I let you go, what is the one thing that we can do for you? Maybe, I don't know, get involved or help spread the word or anything that we can do for you, then please let us know.
Well, I appreciate that. This has been a great conversation. Thanks to the audience for some wonderful questions. Follow me on Twitter at Alex Tapscott, and follow the 9 Point Digital Asset Group at 9PointDAG. And do check out the podcast DeFi Decoded on our YouTube channel, and other great content that we have on the channel as well. I think you'll find it really interesting. If you have an interest in DeFi, if you want to hear from some of the smartest people working on this space, we talk to them regularly. As I mentioned, we just had Greg from Akash, and next week we're speaking to Ryan Selkis from Masari, who's going to give us a summary of his crypto theses, and we're going to share some of our own predictions for the new year as well. So this call was a good warm up for that one. So thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think Ryan, I haven't read the report yet. It's high on my list. I think it's 165 pages or something. But I've been contacted by a lot of people who said, man, he's talking about Cosmos there, pretty positive. So maybe you can ask him about that as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. I linked and shared your profiles here in the chat box, so people can go follow, go subscribe, and also the episode with Greg, which I think is not live yet, right?
It's going to be live tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. We'll keep in touch, and hopefully also see you next year at the Cosmoverse. I think this year you haven't been there, but next year you'll be there. So yeah, would be great to meet you in person as well one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, and we'll see you soon.
Take care, man. See you.